perspectives. So let me see how I can join you and travel along with you and share some of my thoughts as well. So thank you so much for inviting me, Ria,
Of
to
course.
be with all of you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Sarah will
So
just introduce the talk and then you can go on ahead.
yeah. So in continuation from the discussion about stigma, this session is about the importance of treatment. This session about the importance of treatment will be conducted by Dr. Purnima Bhola. Dr. Purnima Bhola currently works as a professor at the Department of Clinical Psychology at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, which is otherwise known as NIMHANS. Due to the stigma around mental health, people avoid seeking help and treatment, which is very important. This session will outline why treatment is necessary and the various types of treatment along the same lines. The speaker will also talk about how to know when to reach out for help, why people refuse to do the same, and much more. We'll also leave the last 15 minutes for questions from you. So use the Q&A option to send in your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, looking back, since you said, I'm at NIMHANS, I'm thinking about my student days when I was studying at NIMHANS. And I do remember that the buses that would pass by, because, there's a bus stop right outside the hospital, they would shout loudly, mental, mental, mental. And that used to be the way that they would, sign that it's the NIMHANS stop, you know. So, really, I can understand all of the things that you were saying about the stigma and the attitudes in society, in our families, among our friends. And these are really some of the barriers to seeking help. It's been wonderful to note, of course, that things have changed in a positive direction. And I think that all of you coming together and having young people's voices is really the way forward to give a platform to mental health and to help people seek the care they need earlier rather than later. So I think many of you are already little experts in your own way. So I just wanted to talk a bit about treatment. How do we understand treatment itself? I think it's a pretty much a black box. So whenever I meet people who don't know much about mental health care or therapy or treatment, uh, they sound very sort of curious about what do I do, and usually the impressions are that something very mysterious is going on, you know, and potentially maybe even harmful or problematic in some way. And I think there's a lot of confusion between the medication aspects of getting help and the therapy or counseling aspects. So that's something that I wanted to speak about. Now, I'm a clinical psychologist, so primarily, of course, I do therapy. Um, but I would say that if I'm to speak today, there's really a very important place for medication as well in certain select cases. So it may, um, for some people, it's the combination that will work well. Some people may, start off with some medication, transition to therapy, and then that becomes more prominent. So it's really very individual. So even if you hear someone else saying that, this was my journey, I didn't need to take medication at all, that's not necessarily true for you. So I think you have to see what do you need and what's the best combination that will work for you, and preferably find a team of mental health support that's going to work the best for you so that you get what you need. um, so I'll of course talk a little bit more about the therapy aspects, and one of the things is really to understand who a therapist is. So of course, when you think back, you think of Sigmund Freud, very famous mental health practitioner, very inscrutable, beard, mysterious. So I hope I'm not looking like that, and I also hope that most therapists or counselors are actually much more accessible, more available, and that you can form some kind of connect with them. So when we're talking about therapy, perhaps what we need to figure out is who's this therapist or counselor, what's that person's role, what's my role, what's this whole sitting inside a room and talking stuff all about. um, Usually when you go to a doctor, let's say for a cough or cold, you go, you tell your symptoms, and very quickly a prescription is whipped out, and hopefully it's a good one, and eventually you get a better if you follow through. But I think when it comes to therapy or counseling, there's a lot of work that both have to do together. So I would say that's one of the key things that I would say, that I would never want to tell someone who saw me that don't worry, I'm just going to help you. The important message would be that I'm going to help you to help yourself. And I'll work hard, but you also have got to work really hard, maybe in some ways harder than I have to work, but maybe the rewards also are going to be something that you can take back with you, which is going to be, your gift to yourself, so to speak. So therapy is hard work. Um, when you go in to see someone for counseling or therapy, really you've got to put yourself out there and really see whether you connect with the person. I sadly I couldn't attend the entire program that you had today, but I'm pretty certain you might have spoken a little bit about your experiences approaching someone. I just heard that it's not that easy to approach a school counselor, not always, but I think in many schools it's working quite well too. So critical thing is to see what's the quality of your relationship with your counselor or therapist. Okay? It's what the fit is for you. Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel, maybe not in the first meeting, but you feel over time that, hey, this is a person I can like open up a little bit to, who's waiting to listen to me, not jumping in with too much advice or sort of invalidating what I'm feeling. Don't worry, at this age, everyone goes through this stuff. It's going to be all right in no time at all. So someone who really understands the depth and intensity of what you're going through, gives you the time, connects with you, but at the same time is ready to course correct or to ask you a few searching questions when you haven't sort of spoken about something. So it's that mix that you're really looking for, that how's the fit between me and my counselor or therapist. And that search is pretty important. If you're lucky, you get it the first time round, but otherwise I think it's worth searching for a good a fit. um, so the fit is perhaps not just about, do I like this person, does he or she seem like interesting or sweet or just helpful or informed or knowledgeable, but also what are we going to do together. So apart from that instinctive feel that you get a connect with this person, the other stuff is, do we agree on like what are the goals of our work together, and what are the things that we're going to do to achieve these goals? Because it can be quite difficult if you want to work on your relationships, but your counselor wants to just focus on your academics. So you really have to see in which way you can decide together, what am I working on, um, what's important to me, can we have a shared understanding about that, and how is the way we're going to approach it and work on it together. Also, since most of you are young people, I think it's also important to ask your questions. All the stuff that you want to know, that take your time, ask more about how therapy works. If you have some questions about confidentiality, or what are we going to do together, how long are we going to meet, what does this mean, really you have to see that in the relationship, are you able to ask, feel free to ask all these questions. That's a pretty good indicator of whether things are going to work out over a period of time or not. And although we might have spoken now about medication or therapy, that's obviously not the only way that you get help. So we have many informal sort of ways of seeking help or treatment. So connecting with your friends, building all your social supports. And also, it's not just your job, right? You might be doing some things. You might find that, for me, some creative like drawing or exercising or, something else works to make me feel better, at least for some time. But apart from that, I think it's also the responsibility of your school or your college or your workplace, and really for society to be part of that whole journey of you getting help and you feeling better. So really it's a collective responsibility, and it's important to see that seeking help is not just one person's job, it's it's somewhere all the forces need to come together and work, which is why I think you spoke about stigma also a little before this session as well. So really to dig into this black box and understand what is treatment all about, and how can I go ahead. So one of the questions a lot of people might ask is, what can I get help for? So do I need to have like OCD or anxiety or depression or some specific disorder which is in some book somewhere? Well, yes, of course, for those things, but perhaps really for anything. If you're feeling lonely, or you're feeling like there's some trouble in relationships that you're not able to figure out, or you just want a space to reflect, you want a sounding board, you want someone who will listen to you without judgments, someone who is going to give you a slightly different perspective, or sometimes someone you don't know can give you a little bit of a different perspective on what's happening with you. So I think it's open. You can really pop in and meet a counselor or therapist for a range of different things, not just when you're struggling with like a very difficult, um, thing like OCD or depression. So that's important to know that it can be whatever you feel you need to work through or you need a space for. One more question that I think you all wanted me to talk about was, how do I know that I need treatment? So, well, of course, there's no like a a test that you can do to quickly say that you're over this, so now you need treatment. But I think you were having some troubles for quite some time. If it's quite frequent, it's very intense, it's going on for a long time, and all the stuff that you've tried on your own doesn't seem to be making it better, or enough for you to feel okay with yourself, or if it's impacting your sleep, your appetite, how you are with your friends. So if you feel you're withdrawing, or you're getting very angry and irritable, or it's impacting your functioning at school, so you're not able to do things the way you wanted to, or even the fun stuff is not seeming that much fun, or you cannot focus, or so all of these things, when you feel like, hey, life is not going for me the way that I would like it to, I think these are all sort of indicators. Of course, it need not always be something that's gone on for a long time, even like a one-time thing which is very intense, which is like a huge stress, or it's a crisis. Even those things are things that you can get help for. While Google is a great thing, I think I think we have to be just a little bit careful, because if you type in various things and you try to slot yourself into different problems, then like all of us can have something or the other going on every day, right? So while you can do these little check-ins here or there, I think it's useful to sort of gather everything together and see that, is this something that I really want to take the next step and get some help. There are many barriers. It doesn't always it's not always such a smooth journey to get help. I think you all have spoken a lot about stigma that is within us, like it's a self stigma. It's not like others are things. So it's something you carry within you, or it's stuff that other people, or the messages from society that we've just kind of like filled our heads with. So that's of course a huge barrier, but there's also like a knowledge barrier. That, is this really a problem worth seeking help for? Or even if I seek help, where do I go? Which place do I go to? Or can I afford it? So I think in our country, that's another difficult thing, because if you don't have a lot of money of your own and you're going to a large clinic or as someone in private practice, it's quite difficult. If you're going to some place which doesn't charge a lot, sometimes the processes to get in there are so difficult to imagine that you just say, I can't do this. And also the barrier to maybe like, who do I tell? So I think the first barrier is really with ourselves, to acknowledge to ourselves that, okay, this is something that is, I've tried, but now I need to sort of speak and share with somebody. So I think, rather than just talking about barriers, we also need to see how do I overcome that barrier. So first step is perhaps to feel that, okay, let me share with somebody, that one person or some space that I have that I can just share things with. And sometimes that's like an opening, and it sort of brings you at least one step closer to seeking help, because sometimes we just don't realize, like all of you have so beautifully shared your different experiences here, the little that I heard, that must have meant that you took that first step to speak to somebody, and that opened a door, and then you could sort of move forward. So sometimes I think that rather than just sharing our own struggles with how, our mental health journeys, it's also important to share the good stuff. Like, I got help, I spoke to so and so, this person was supportive, or I learned about something that I didn't know before. I didn't know whom to go to, but my friend told me there's this helpline. It's a 24/7 helpline, and I can just call anytime. I spoke to a supportive counselor, and then I got the courage to seek help in some other way as well. So each person will have their own story of that first step that they took that got them closer to seeking help. And I would really like to hear more of such stories, rather than just only the barriers or the struggles, so to speak. Um, uh, and I think also, all of you coming together like this, and I hope that there are people who are listening, people who are, who will share this with others, and parents and educators and other people who will hear about this and say, we've got to think a little bit about the messages that we give. So in case we say, hey, just snap out of it, or everybody goes through this, or just focus on your studies, everything will be fine, or this happened to me too, and it just went away. So you know maybe everyone will reflect on those messages which are not so supportive, and think a little bit about giving those messages that help someone move towards sharing and sort of getting better. um, so one of my friends who went through depression, she actually, I think it's available somewhere online. She actually wrote this thing called 100 Things Not to Say to Someone Who's Depressed. So she actually made a list of all the various supposedly supportive things that people said to her and which she felt were not helpful. But what's really good, at the end, she's also written about what would have helped her, or what has helped her. And so that's something for all of us to see, even when someone's sharing something with us, how do we respond, how do we support them, so that we don't feel overwhelmed, but yet we can like nudge them like a bit in the right direction. So I wanted to take some time, and I hope in the discussion we can have some time for this, to talk about when you feel that, is it a real problem? Because, I'm supposed to, I have so-called everything in life, or I am in a comfortable position in life, or I'm in a position of privilege, or whatever it might be. So is this really considered a real problem? So that's one thought process we might have. And the other thought process is a feeling that if I have a mental health vulnerability, then it means like I'm not strong enough. I'm a weak person. It wouldn't have happened to me if I wasn't weak in this way. So I think this sort of self-critical sort of approach is the one we really need to target. So are you going to feel powerless, or are you going to feel empowered? And I think all of you, those of you who are here on this platform today and who have got together to sort of put together your initiative, this is an approach towards empowerment, right? This is saying we are taking a step, we're doing something to help ourselves, we're speaking out, we have a voice, and we are going to share. And in this process, we help ourselves and we help others. So this sort of image of being powerless has to be replaced by an image of when you seek help for yourself, you're actually empowered. So that is the really key shift that I hope to see. And along with your platform, I think there's some really good platforms that are coming up in our country. It's all very well to see platforms that come from Australia. So there's Beyond Blue. There's so many other initiatives in different countries about youth depression or anxiety or mental health in general. But we need something that's for our country, right? Something where people from India are speaking, where we are sharing, and where it's like rooted in our realities. Hmm? Because the truth is, not every school has a counselor. We have a huge population. We have very few counselors and therapists and mental health care system. So what's going to work for us? So I'm going to talk a little bit about one initiative that I thought was quite interesting. Some of you might have already seen it. It's called It's Okay to Talk. So I think it's okay to talk.in, and it's by Sangat and a bunch of other organizations. And it's basically young people sharing about their struggles, but also their positive experiences in getting help and getting better. It sort of creates a space for that. And I can see that your initiative fits right in there with that. Um, and I think more of this, so more of the message, your message of, it's okay to be gray in a black and white world. These are the things that we want more of. So that is not just an individual sort of struggle that I've got to speak up, I've got to seek help, but there's a culture of uh, speaking, of sharing, and of sort of coming together. And that's really where we need to go in India, at least. And also to hear from other people. I'm just going to take a little bit of more time to speak about the importance of empathy and self-compassion. I think it's a tricky balance, because as one of you were just sharing, that sometimes you want to be there for the other person, you want to help them, you want to be there for them, and in that process you sometimes forget that we also have to be compassionate towards ourselves. And so if we're going to take a step towards getting help for ourselves or helping other people, I think empathy is a very, very key step to be able to step into someone else's shoes and sort of take that step. So I don't know if any of you are aware of the Empathy Museum project, which started somewhere in UK. And it's a traveling exhibit, which is like a giant shoebox. And inside they have shoes of different people. So it can be someone who's a migrant, somebody who's a sex worker, somebody who's, from different parts of the world, different professions, different experiences. And the idea is that if you pick up that shoe, you also can hear their story. The Empathy Museum has also done these initiatives where you sit across the table from someone whom you don't know. So it could be, and they've also done it with a mental health focus at times. So maybe you speak to someone who's had depression and you talk to them, and maybe you don't understand before, but when you speak to them and you hear the story, you get that, you get a different understanding and you feel what they're feeling. So I think more of these initiatives are the ones that are really needed in our country as well. So that we're not just hearing about it from the US or UK or somewhere else, but we're doing some of that here as well. And I think I'll end with, like, what's the key question really for today? The key question is, why should we take treatment at all? Why should we do it? So if we're nudging towards getting help for ourselves, what's the advantage? Because it is something that it takes time, it takes effort. You have to struggle through, whatever barriers you have. And I would say the most important reason is that you can get better. That's it is not something that's just like mumbo jumbo, and there are well-known treatments, well-researched. You're going to trained people, and there is a good chance that you're going to, maybe the process is not just overnight, but you can really get better. So when people ask me, you've chosen to be a therapist, a clinical psychologist, you've been doing this for many years, so isn't it like a really difficult profession to be in? Don't you just go home feeling really low every day? And I mean, my answer usually is that I actually feel it's a great and positive profession to be in, because you're meeting people, you're meeting human beings, and every day you're learning something about human strength and resilience. Because people get better, they go through their struggles, they show how they work against odds to build up their reserves, to work with their strengths, to recognize their vulnerabilities, to build up their network. So I think it's like an amazingly positive profession on the whole to be in. So if we view it like that when I go for help, I'm going to get better. I'm going to use all the good stuff within me and learn some new skills and take medication if I have to, and everything is going to add to make me like the version of myself that I wanted to be or what I can be. So I think that's really the reason to go down this path of sort of helping ourselves. Um, in this process, I would say we have to hang in there. Sometimes it's not very quick. So you can question yourself in between that, I was better. And now again, there's been a bit of a, dip, or, there's a period of stress or thing. But I think if we just hang in there and we work together and you find your tribe, so to speak, and you build your network um, of supports, then there can be a great advantage to taking help and sort of moving towards. Sometimes it's not like the difficulty goes away completely, but you recognize that, okay, these are some of my quirks, or these are some of my things that okay, this point I need to be a little bit careful, or these are the situations which are a little bit tricky for me. So these are points I kind of like regroup, and I think of all the stuff that I need to do, all the skills I've learned, and I apply them in a more thought out way, and I get some extra support. So you just become more aware, and you become someone who's sort of taking charge or being empowered in the process and working along with your therapist or counselor. I think if it's a collaborative journey, that's really what you're sort of looking for in the process. And by doing this, I think there's a bonus. You're likely to be able to help other people also get some help if they're experiencing mental health challenges too. So I really want to end on this positive note, that the reason to get help is because you can get better, and it does help. So I'm going to end now, and I'm happy to take any questions or even to hear some of your sharings and experience.
Okay, so the audience can send in questions if they would like, but we had a couple of questions that came up. So we wanted to ask you about how the difference between online, like now everything's moved online, right? So how is it different doing therapy online? Do you feel it's like as effective as it was before? How have you changed your like treatment plan to accommodate this mode?
All right. I think that's a really important question. And I would say that for many of us, we're a little bit early in the game here, because we were not doing this routinely earlier, most of us, right? So part of it, I think we've learned through our own experience. Very quickly, we had to transition to online sessions. So I would say some of the biggest barriers were the tech barriers, really. All the connectivity and all of that. We were quite apprehensive, I think, many of us therapists and counselors, that will we be able to build that bond, that kind of connect? Will we be able to sort of share and build that sense of a safe space? But at Nimhans, we've also taken a lot of feedback from people whom we've seen online, and mostly we find that a majority are quite comfortable. They seem to have eased in with not that much difficulty into the online scenario. And in fact, some of them have said that even after the pandemic ends, they would like to maybe do a mix. Sometimes come and see us and sometimes do it online, because of course there are practical advantages to not having to battle through Bangalore traffic. And the fact that maybe they feel that, even in this way we can connect. I will say we try to use video rather than just audio, because you're missing too many cues if you're doing it just, on the telephone. While shifting, I think we're that much more attentive to like someone's body language, facial expressions, and you're trying to tune in a little bit more with that. So I'd say it's a learning curve, but it's definitely much more positive and workable than we might have initially thought that it was. So I would say in the future we might well see a lot of combinations of online and I think for young people, it's a big bonus because you have pretty hectic schedules with school and this and that. So if there's a possibility of sometimes doing it online, um, I think a lot of younger people have not found that shift so very difficult. But I'm speaking from my perspective, so I'm happy to know what others have to say about this transition as well.
We got another question from the audience. So, what is the role of technology in helping and supporting the betterment of mental health? And how is technology being leveraged in mental health research?
So I think technology has huge possible advantages, ones that we have not used as much in India as in other countries. But now we've had to do like a quick catch up. So I would say that one is, of course, a very simple shift to some online sort of sessions, etc. That's an easy one. But I do see there's a lot of thrust, including from the government. So some of us are involved in a new project that's looking at developing certain apps which are to support mental health. There are a lot of self-guided sort of supportive interventions also, let's say for anxiety or things like that. So I think there's going to be a big boost for all of these sort of initiatives in the country. I think a lot of institutes of higher education are offering their students online therapy support as just part of everything else that they offer, which they were obviously not doing some time ago. So I think that this is going to be a huge movement in the country. Regardless, it doesn't mean it's going to replace in-person sessions or the more traditional forms of care. But I think it's going to be a huge area of growth in our country. And I think it's welcomed because we don't have too many trained people in the country. So unless we reach out in these ways, we're really going to be left far behind. People are going to want help, but we're not going to be able to meet that need if we don't use these avenues as
well. Earlier, like during this webinar, we had got a question about the challenges faced with maintaining confidentiality during online sessions. So if you would like to take up that.
Okay, so I'll just speak again a little bit more from our experience in the hospital. So one of the things that we did is that we made sure that when we were transitioning to online care, that we did have an informed consent process. So this shares all of how online therapy is done, how it will work, how we will maintain confidentiality and not. So let me say some of the issues that can come up with confidentiality in online sessions. One is that you have to discuss very openly whether session is going to be recorded or not. Specify that one will not be recording the sessions, one will not be using the sessions in any other way, and confidentiality works both ways, right? Even if I'm the therapist, I wouldn't want my client to be recording the session and then be putting up little snippets online, right? So it's both ways. I don't think there's much of a change in terms of confidentiality as it operates, because we ensure confidentiality. The only time that would not be possible to maintain is, let's say, if there's a threat to someone's well-being, and that's something also we will discuss with the person right at the outset. So typically we would have a list of what are the emergency help-seeking resources in and around where the person is. We'll usually have a family contact person's number, like your preferred contact. That's also something that we would take right at the outset. So as it is an in-person therapy, I think just discussing these upfront is pretty important. One other aspect of confidentiality is trying to ensure that, like, if I am seeing someone for therapy, then I want to be sure that I'm only speaking to you and you don't have someone else in the room with you. So that's also something to discuss, that, this is a session between two of us, and can you just check that you won't be interrupted and that there's nobody in the room, etc. During the pandemic, it's also been challenging because some of our clients will be living in spaces that don't offer them a lot of privacy. So uh, it's just that they would like to have the confidentiality of the session maintained, but sometimes we really had to negotiate what time of the day will we do it, or they have to be in very odd locations in their home or just outside their home, or so that we can have a session which is truly like in a confidential space. So these are some of the modifications we've had to make uh, because of the pandemic and the online sudden shift to online.
I think that's there's I think one question. So how is the response to online therapy treatment?
So we did do a sort of mini survey of people we saw, at least in the unit at which I worked, and I think that we've got fairly encouraging response to online therapy. Typically, most of the barriers that people reported were more the tech issues and not having the bandwidth to support video sessions sometimes. But in terms of comfort with the therapist, feeling that they could express, feeling that they could share, I think we've got a more positive response than we would have earlier imagined, along with our uncertainty. But I don't think that this should make us complacent, because we are not dealing with a group of people, right? I'm working with individual people. So I have to see, like, if I'm speaking to you, is this online thing working for you and me? And so I think it's important for each of us to talk to, as a therapist, I would say I need to check with each individual client, how is this online thing for you? Is there something we need to change? When the situation changes, how would you like it to be? Are there, what's working and what's not working? So just doing an overall survey and saying mostly it's working okay is really not the answer. It's what's working for each person or not. And I think that's something for us to remember, that it can't just be like a global sort of thing. It has to be an individual thing that we need to check.
I think that's all the questions we got.
Anything else from your team of organizers, anything that you would like to ask or share in terms of seeking help, or why treatment is important?
So I think if people listen to our previous discussion, they understood how much we actually care about this entire concept and this entire topic, and also how we're trying to change the stigma around it and encourage people to reach out for help. So in terms of that, I don't think we have much more to say, but I just want to thank you for um, for coming in and taking the time to talk to us about this. Your talk was very informative, and I hope the audience enjoyed it as much as we did.
Thanks. Thank you, all of you. Thank you for inviting me.
Hopefully, we'll work together again in the future.
Just adding, the previous sessions we had also kind of complemented this. And just in case you missed it and anyone would like to watch it again, we will be posting the recordings of these sessions on, we will be posting them, and you can find further details on our website and on our social media. Again, thank you, Dr. Purnima, for taking out your time for this.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this webinar series. We hope to do more of these in the future with different topics and different themes. So stay tuned for more. All of the updates will be on our website and on our social media, which I will share in the chat right now.
Thank you so much for attending. We hope to see you guys in our future webinars and stay safe.